Greetings, Mark. This is Jason, your instructor, and I just wanted to kind of go over your post, maybe together here on video, so that you can get an idea of what I'm looking at and how the whole post comes together for me. And in addition, we're at that time now where I think we have to have the chat, and the chat is basically the talk about climate change, and in many ways a lot of what we've been talking about so far in this course, in some way or another, seems to have a direct relation to climate change, which is interesting because in the United States, at least, we don't really have any sort of federal climate change action plan or policy that's been put into place by Congress. For the most part, climate change has been left up to the cities and counties and states, and there's varying levels of I want to say not compliance, but there's varying levels of action that are being taken place or that are taking place. So, for example, in a state like California, we have pretty strict climate change regulations, and the governor has signed that all energy sources by the year 2030 have to be at least 50% from renewables. Other states really don't have very much regulation when it comes to climate change, and that's really a product of the political process. It seems like in some states where, like, for example, West Virginia, where coal is a really big industry and it's a big employer, you're not going to find a whole lot of climate change regulation because it directly affects the people that are voting for local politicians. So if you take it from a state to state perspective, climate change policies vary. But on the federal level, we really don't have anything, even though our current federal government has participated in some of the recent climate change negotiations that are going on globally, like the most recent talks in Paris. They do set targets and they do want to try, but the United States is really reluctant to do anything that's going to put the United States at a disadvantage, especially when dealing with India and China. So as long as the United States is one of the biggest polluters in the world when it comes to climate change, it's directly tied to our economic progress. And China is also a really big polluter. And their argument as well, the way that the United States got to be as economically powerful as it is today is because they haven't worked under regulations that have anything to do with climate change. So as China wants to continue its economic growth, it's reluctant to sign on to some of these global treaties and agreements because it feels like it should have the opportunity to catch up with the economic growth that the United States has experienced over the last 100 years. So this makes things difficult, and you can see the product of things like air pollution and economic growth in China. So anyway, I want to just kind of get to your post. Thanks for starting this discussion off. Maybe I sound like a little bit of a windbag here, but that's because you got the first post, and I just wanted to kind of get us started. So you looked at the IPCC report, and for the most part, the facts that are presented there are things that are happening. We are experiencing more severe storms. It seems like sea level rise is a really hot topic. Glacial melt is a problem, and there's plenty of evidence. I mean, you can just go and look at some of the time-lapse photography of glaciers receding to see that it's definitely accelerating, and that's going to create sea level rise of a few inches. But the real question is, why does that matter? And this is a really big problem across the world. For one thing, in third world countries, they really don't care all that much about climate change because they're just trying to survive, and they're trying to feed their people. And when your needs as far as survival aren't being met, it's really hard to think about something that might happen in the future to places that don't really affect you all that much, like the Arctic or the Antarctic. So in looking at this data, it's no wonder that a lot of politicians still are denying climate change. And I don't think that they're denying it as in they're just stupid and they don't want to acknowledge it. I think they're doing that for political reasons because, people that don't live along the coasts aren't really going to be all that concerned with sea level rise. And people have a tendency to only think about their own interests. So, we do see something of a problem with that. So, in thinking about sustainable development, because you mentioned sustainable development here in deforestation, that's really sort of an excellent response to climate change. Like, even if the facts don't mean that much to you, is it really all that difficult to do things and grow sustainably so that if this becomes a really big problem in the future, we've done things to mitigate that? Everybody in this discussion was going to be asked to look at a different report and then talk about mitigation, adaptation, or sustainable development. But basically, all the reports say the same thing, that we have measurable effects and climate change is happening. So what are our choices? Well, we can either just decide that we're going to adapt and everybody's going to have to deal with more severe storms, warmer temperatures, and sea level rise, or we're going to have to mitigate the effects of climate change, and that means that we're going to have to take steps like reducing our carbon footprint and finding technologies that are going to allow us to participate in things like transportation without affecting greenhouse gases and the carbon in the atmosphere. And people need to learn about sustainable development. They really need to learn what that means. And that doesn't just mean that as we grow, we shouldn't cut the forest down to make way for new housing developments. It also means that in existing developments, we need to find ways to reduce our carbon footprint by doing things that are just smarter. In big cities, for example, they have fairly good transportation networks. So why aren't we building those up like in Los Angeles and giving people the opportunity to get around in a way that's convenient for them, instead of building at the fringes of urban development and building suburbs that are serviced by nothing but roads. And the way that we build communities matters. Like, is it really all that necessary for everybody to have a 5-bedroom house in a sprawling suburban development where there's really no way to get to the store except by getting in your car and driving to it? Could we build up instead of out and give people the services that they need at the ground level while they live in 2, 3, or 4-bedroom condos that are just built up instead? We have to get away from this illusion that we've created country living in the suburbs by cutting down forests and giving everybody this nice big chunk of land and a house in the middle of it, like a farmhouse. Because in reality, we're not actually living in the country, are we? We're all living in houses that pretty much look the same on the same size tracts of land in some suburban development. So those are my thoughts. You did a good job on the post, and I hope that this helps to continue the conversation about climate change, because everything, energy, even waste disposal, the food we eat, all of these different environmental policies like land use, all in some way or another come back to this essential question of, are we destroying the planet, and is climate change going to be the end result that we're unable to deal with? All right, thanks a lot.